Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Christie Tate, who's here to share with us her new book, Group: How One Therapist and a Circle of Strangers Saved My Life. So have you ever considered therapy, but you're a little afraid to maybe start? Well, today's show is really going to address just that. So Christie Tate is a Chicago-based writer, and her work has been published in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, A Perfect Wedding, and many more. Her book Group is a Reese Witherspoon book club pick and a New York Times bestseller. So let's welcome to the show, Christie Tate.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. I was just so touched by how this book, that just how you talk about it. Why don't you share with our listeners what was the inspiration for writing this book?
Sure. I had the idea that I wanted to write a book, and first, just it was sort of a nebulous desire to write. And I thought, well, I never considered writing a memoir. I thought memoirs were only for famous people. So I started writing a novel about a young lawyer who was very unhappy in her life, but she had this very complicated relationship with her therapist. And it was not a good novel. And I didn't know how to end it. And so I just had the therapist and the woman just kind of hook up, like romantically, which is really problematic, as you can imagine. And I mentioned it to my therapist, and I'm part of a therapy group, and I brought it to group, and the therapist, who I call in my subsequent memoir, my therapist, Dr. Rosen, said, "Why don't you read the scene where you have them hook up?" And I thought, oh my God, that's terrible. So I read the scene in group, and everyone's picturing me and the Dr. Rosen, and they were screeching and screaming and begging me to stop. And someone turned to me in group and he said, "Why don't you just write the true story of what happened to you in therapy?" And that was the first moment. That's the first spark where I realized that maybe someone besides John Bon Jovi or Prince Harry could write a book about their own lives, like an ordinary woman. And I set out from there, and then it just took on a whole life of its own. And now it lives in the world as a book called Group.
Oh, and it is a fabulous book. I've been just enjoying the audiobook. It's so touching. I know you talk about one thing I think that resonates with so many people why your book is so popular. You talk about loneliness.
Mm.
So when did you first feel that you were in this place of being lonely?
I think I had been lonely, honestly, for most of my life, but I did not have any language for that. I think I was a I was like a mixture of a bookish kid, but also a kid who was extroverted, and I don't know how those two sort of came together and swirled in my personality. What I remember being a kid was I had a lot of secrets. I had secrets that once they came out in the light of day, they seemed pretty mundane. But when you're a little kid holding secrets all by yourself, they become phantasmagoric and really distort reality. So I had secrets about things going on in my family, addiction, recovery from addiction. And I had the notion that I wasn't allowed to talk about it. And by the time I became a teenager, I had my own secrets about what I did with food. And secrets are really isolating. And because I had a lot of secrets around food, a huge part of life, I was really, I couldn't be known. Nobody knew me. I sat so much I sat in so much loneliness around who I was, and it really just backed me into a corner. So by the teenage years, what probably was just normal childhood, sometimes I'd be a little bit isolated or lonely. It really took on speed when I began engaging in bulimia and just secretive rules and rituals around food that I thought nobody knew. Looking back now, people were like, "Oh yeah, we knew. You were completely bonkers around food." I thought I was doing such a good job.
Oh no.
So by the time I hit when I reached the age of 19, my eating disorder had progressed to such a state that I really was afraid for my life and my sanity, and I was able to enter 12-step recovery group for food recovery, and that really, really helped. But what persisted was a lack of skill. I mean, to say it most plainly, I lacked the skills for intimacy with friends, with family, certainly with romantic partners, and I kept ending up alone and longing for people and company and intimates and beloveds all around me. But when people got close, I got really scared and kind of withdrew. So it was a terrible catch 22. I had a horrible longing and no skill. Actually, my skills ran in the opposite direction. Like I was very skilled at getting away from people, and I couldn't figure out how to harmonize my deep longings with my skills and my abilities.
Well, I think so many people are going through that. In fact, I feel like we have a generation that doesn't know how to have deep connections with
Mhm.
other people because they've been so raised with devices or like used to, I'll text you or, send you whatever. So when we look at that, I think more and more people are feeling this sense of loneliness.
Oh, I feel that so strongly. Even with, so what happened when I got to 19, I got into recovery and my life was way, way better. There was still this whole slice of loneliness and lack of skill, and I'm still holding on to a lot of secrets. And I entered group therapy when I was 27, and I had made it to law school, and I made it to my first year. And what's interesting, I think, about high achieving people, and at this point, I've heard from so many high achieving women who are killing it at work or school in their professions. I've heard from nurses, lawyers, bankers, personal trainers, booksellers, writers. They are absolutely crushing it, and their personal lives are really, really deserts. They don't know how to put together. It's exactly where I was at the start of my book group. How can I be so smart? Number 1 in my law school class, and I have no idea how to invite a friend over. And I'm not exaggerating. I didn't know. Like, do you just say, come over? But then what do you do? And the idea of that struck such fear in me that I just studied. And I think a lot of people, I think there's so many clever, creative ways to hide loneliness. Certainly there's addiction and things that are obviously so destructive. There's also work and achievement and exercise and CrossFit. There's so many ways to chase away the loneliness without ever dealing with the root cause. And I see it everywhere, and I hear from readers all the time, and I just shake my head because I know. I absolutely know.
In your book, you talk about how you wished for death. What brought you to that point?
The precipitating event for really thinking, "Should I die? I kind of hope I die." I had gotten to law school, I had done really well, which if you push everyone out of your life and you just study all the time, like I would start studying for final exams in January, and the final exams are in May. I was so intense. And I felt I could justify it. I thought, "Oh, well, I have to because I'm gonna have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt," which is true, and if I don't do well, I don't know, I would say I think I won't get a job, which at the time, I was in law school in the early 2000s. Everybody got jobs, with some very notable exceptions, so that was just a weird justification, but what happened is I reached the end of my first year and they released the class ranks, and I found out I was first in my class, which is cause for celebration, and I did celebrate for about 5 minutes, and then a complete cold terror just seized my whole body because I knew in my heart, "Oh my god, I've set myself on a path where I'm gonna study like a maniac for the next 2 years of law school, and I'm gonna graduate, and I'm gonna pick the hardest, most intense law firm, and I'm gonna put my head down, and I'm gonna work so hard, and I'm gonna bury myself in work, become partner, and I'm gonna get all these professional accolades, and I am going to die alone." And that's exactly how I talked to myself about it. That was my very, very deep belief that I had put myself on a course where I was never going to have to truly look at my loneliness, my isolation, my unmet longings, my social deprivation. I wasn't gonna have to look at it because I had picked law for that exact reason. I'd gone through a breakup, I was lonely. I'm I'm a somewhat dramatic, intense person, so I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna die." Every time I got broken up with or there was a romantic disaster, I would feel like I'm gonna die alone. So it's like, "Oh, I'll just be a lawyer. It won't matter. I'll have tons of money and I'll have a nice house and it will be compensation." So when I found out I'd done really well and my quote plan was working, I thought, "Oh no. Oh no." Because my plan was a plan of personal self-destruction and professional ascendancy, and that's not what I really wanted, but that was my best idea I could come up with on my own, and I would have, like, intrusive thoughts, like, driving through a rough neighborhood in my town of Chicago, I would think, "Well, there's gang violence in this neighborhood, maybe someone will shoot me," and I thought, "This isn't normal." I could hear it getting louder and louder, and I thought, "I'm a woman in recovery. I have the brightest future. What am I doing? Wishing for death. There's got to be a better way to live." And looking back, I'm grateful that the suicidal ideation got louder because it really scared me and it pushed me to get help.
If you feel you need help, please reach out to the suicide hotline. They have somebody there 24/7 that can talk to you. That number's 988. Again, just dial 988 and they're available 24 hours a day. So, from the outside, do you think that people kind of looked at you and thought, "Gosh, she's really has it all"?
Oh, yes, I heard that all the time, and that was so confusing, the cognitive dissonance, and I knew what they were saying. I had a body I could buy cl I had a body that was healthy, and I could fit into a size I remember my pa this is no longer true, but I could wear a size 6 pants. I had I had health, I had this incredibly bright future, I had enough money now it was from student loans, but I had enough money to live in a decent neighborhood, I had safety, I had tons we didn't use the word privilege at the time, but I had all privilege except gender, and other people weren't looking at me saying, "Oh, this woman's for sure gonna die alone." That was a voice in my head, another one of my secrets, and people could not imagine with I was all these doors were gonna fly open when I graduated from law school if I kept it up, which I had every intention of. So, you can't tell if someone's having thoughts about wanting to, end it all. You can't tell from the outside because nobody would have guessed how deeply my depression was gripping me at this time.
Well, I think a lot of people can resonate with that feeling and having their secrets overwhelm them in many ways because I know a lot of families have secrets and being able
Mhm.
to get beyond that's something that takes a little work.
My experience is getting over even just the habit and the process of hiding myself and keeping secrets, even about things that aren't like I knew growing up, I had the distinct impression I was not supposed to tell anyone I had a parent in 12-step recovery for alcoholism, or what kind of rage went on when the doors were closed and no one was around. Certainly don't tell anyone about what's going on with my food. So those kinds of secrets definitely build up, and for me, they built up into a sense of life had lost its sort of I lost my way completely. It was just the secrets obliterated my internal connection to myself and to goodness and the future, and I think that's what's really pernicious about secrets, and I could not have gotten over that without help. I could not have done it without a lot of help, more than I wanted.
Well, thank goodness we have the help. And what's really interesting, we're in a time where talking about these things isn't as difficult as it was 10, 20 years ago. So being able to have these open conversations about mental health, about addiction, thank goodness we're in a time where it's a little bit more, I wouldn't say open's necessarily the word, but more people can talk about it and have honest discussions.
Oh, I think about that all the time. A couple years ago, I was with my kids, they were 12 and 10 at the time, and we walked into a store and there was a huge like a cutout of Michael Phelps. So it's huge because he's like tall and he's the decorated Olympic swimmer. And it said the little cutout said something about I go to therapy because it helps me perform and be the man I want to be. And I was like, oh my God, we have Olympians talking about their struggles with addiction or their own struggling with their demons with the aid of therapy. Like you would not have seen when I was 10 years old, you would not have walked into a store and been able to see an American sport hero talking about therapy. It's incredible how far we've come in blowing open mental health conversations. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for my kids and the generations that come after them that we're getting much better. We have a ways to go, but we are getting much better at identifying, talking, breaking open all the shame and stigma around mental health issues.
I know back in, when I was growing up, that wasn't talked about either, and that would have been like the death of somebody's career had they brought that kind of stuff up.
Absolutely. Like, so my father got into recovery for alcoholism, and which is a wonderful thing for a family. But the shame that we had alcoholism in the family was so intense that bled into the recovery. And, he was in an anonymous program. So it wasn't my place or anybody's place to go around talking about it. But the secrecy that was imposed was because you're exactly right. It would have been career limiting. That was the belief, right? My mom was the guardian of privacy, and I know her intentions were good. She's trying to keep this family that got back on its feet intact. She's trying to keep my dad in a job, and nobody wants to be socially ostracized, and that's what the stakes were back then in the 70s and 80s. Probably, that's and there's still some communities where if you come out as alcoholic or recovering, there are consequences. So that's very real. And some people have asked me, "Oh, you're mad that there was all this secrecy." I'm not mad. We didn't have the skills as a culture. So how would my family be able to embrace, say what you want to say, tell anyone, there's no secrets here? That would have been completely socially suicidal, professionally suicidal from their vantage point. And I can't possibly be mad at that.
I believe none of us grew up with the skill set to deal with that, even our parents. And so now they're being able to listen to some of this, embrace some of it, and they're probably a little bit more relieved that we have this openness in place.
Oh, I have to believe that's true because, when anyone lets go of a secret, everyone around them gets better. I think that's true, right? Because I feel like it's my belief, like if someone's plunging downward in addiction of any kind or mental illness, other people are going down with them because they love them, right? So the same thing is true for mental health. If I get healthier, if I let go of my secrets, if I move towards connection, community, healing, the people around me are going to feel the reverberations of that and they will get better too. I think that's something that we forget about when one person gets better, all the systems they're part of will also have a bump in their mental health, and that's a great thing.
So let's talk about Dr. Rosen's group. When did you hear about his group?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was pretty involved in the 12-step world in my Chicago life, and I would hear whispers of people talking about their therapists, and frankly, he sounded bonkers. And like I would hear, like I dated a guy who saw Dr. Rosen and he would say, "Oh, my therapist wanted me to ask you to give me an affirmation about how loving I am." And I was like, "What? What are these words? What are you saying?" And when I was after I had gotten my class rank and I was sort of tanking emotionally and mentally, I had dinner with a friend of mine, and she had just started seeing Dr. Rosen. She was probably like 2 months in, and I looked at her across the table, and she just looked so bright and different. Something was different. Some lights had gone on behind her eyes. And I was like, "What's going on with you?" She had that look like she'd fallen, like when someone falls in love, they're kind of glowy. And I was like, "Are you pregnant? New lip gloss? What's the deal here?" And she said, "I think it's my new therapist." And I kind of threw up my hands in part because I thought, well, I can't afford that. So I don't even want to hear about it. But she told me, I'm seeing this new guy, it's group, and I was like, "Oh, that's weird." I hadn't understood that people in my 12-step world were joining groups with this Dr. Rosen, and that sounded so weird and scary. Even though I was in a 12-step group, I was like, "This is just too weird." And she's like, "Yeah, he's really helping me. I'm really looking at myself. I really am changing." And I believed her because I could see it. And I in my mind, I was like, "Well, I can't do that because I'm on a law school budget." And she was married to a corporate blah de blah, so she had tons of money. So I thought, "Well, this is a door that's closed to me." But then she said to me, "Well, it's group, so it's really cheap." I was like, "Oh, that's why we go to group." So that was my first. It's one thing to sort of hear these anecdotal stories about this therapist who would tell people, go to your boss and tell him, that you would like an affirmation from him. Like it was crazy to hear these stories, but to see in my friend her change in her face, her demeanor, her joy valence seemed to have risen. And that's when I thought, okay, at the time it was $70 a week, which was still way more money than I had, but I just thought something in me made me call him, even though it's weird now looking back. It's like, I'm going to go see the shrink that my friends see. That's really boundaryless and strange. And none of that stopped me. I left a message and I just followed like an intuition, like maybe this guy could help me. And then that's how I ended up in a chair across from him telling him, "I don't really have any money. I could get a loan from my law school, and I'm really lonely. Can you help me?"
What was the first meeting, the group meeting like? Because I think a lot of people you mentioned and, it sounds scary. I think a lot of people look at that and go, "Gosh, that is scary. I would have to talk about all of my stuff in front of everybody else?"
Yes, I share this with people. There's two scary things about group. One is having to do your deep psychological work in front of an audience. So that's terrifying. Especially if you're a person like me with a ton of secrets. I'm like, I'm going to come in here and talk about my sex life, my food, my money, my childhood in front of strangers. That sounds terrible. The other scary part is, wait, I'm going to have to sit there while other people do it too. Is that going to be boring or scary or titillating? Like, you just don't know. And I can tell you from someone who's been doing this 20 years, it is all of those things. There are moments of all of that. And so the way that Dr. Rosen structured it was you have 3 sessions with him one-on-one, just the preliminary. I assume that those sessions, I understand them as me getting to know him and how he works and him getting to know me so he knows what group to put me in. I didn't know how many groups he had at the time or how many he has now, but like if there's 10 groups, he's trying to figure out what's the right fit. Co-ed, single sex. Some of them have categories. Like the group that I ended up joining, my first group, I've moved around since then, but my first group was a professionals group. So everyone in there had a license to do their profession. So it's mostly lawyers and doctors. There was a chiropractor, a veterinarian. um, so I go in there and the first session is just terrifying. I don't want to overemphasize it. I did not skip like a happy, joyous, and free unicorn to my first meeting. I thought, okay, I'm going to show up. If it doesn't work, I don't have to come back. but I was really curious, but I knew on some very deep, like cellular level, I was afraid because as soon as I committed to Dr. Rosen, I told him at the beginning of August, I committed, okay, I will join a group. And he told me, okay, you're going to go at this time. It's a 90-minute, it's the professionals group. And I said to him, well, can I call you and tell you if I for sure? And he's like, nope, I need a commitment right now. Which I was like, oh, I'm so busted. He's like not gonna let me be wishy-washy. He wants a commitment. And I thought, this is what I do not know how to do. It's commit. So I said, okay, I'll join. And then you have to wait a month to start the group. And I don't quite understand that. It's like a waiting period for both the group to prepare for your entrance and for you to prepare for your own. But it's like I commit to him and he's like, see you in a month. And in that month, I did not sleep more than 5 hours a night, more typically electrified with worry, but also hope. Because I thought, this I have not tried. I have never paid for mental health treatment. He's an addiction psychiatrist. I saw on his wall in his office, I saw Ivy League degrees, and I thought, I have never let myself have treatment. I've gone to 12-step program in that you can pay $1 or not. You know, it's grassroots, it's free to anyone who needs it. I have never given myself this kind of treatment and care. So I know that I was scared, but I was also deeply curious and very, very hopeful. But I didn't know it was hope. It just came out as anxiety, you know?
I bet it did come out as anxiety. My goodness. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Christie Tate in regards to her book, Group. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Are you an actor, public speaker, or an executive telling your story over Zoom? Jean-Louis Rodrigue and Scott Weintraub's new book, Back to the Body, takes the process they use to coach top Hollywood talent like Margot Robbie, Jack Black, and Ke Huy Quan and makes it available to everyone. Using your body and its energy as a point of departure, your work will gain an enhanced level of performance and depth. Back to the Body, available on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
Every day, pets are surrendered and abandoned. For these helpless and hurting animals, Paws Humane Society acts as a voice for the voiceless, providing hope for a brighter future. You can make a difference in the life of a shelter pet. Become a humane hero today. Just $10 a month will provide much-needed food, shelter, medical care, and love. It takes a community. It takes heroes like you. Together we can. Together we will. Together, we are Paws Humane. Visit pawshumane.org to be a hero in every animal story.
What if everything we think we know about addiction, depression, anxiety, and trauma is missing the one key element that will actually let you walk away from them for good? My name's Bob Gardner, founder of The Freedom Specialist and creator of a body-based approach that eliminates suffering and creates happiness, health, and well-being on autopilot. You can read all about it in my book, Built for Freedom, or start your own adventure toward lasting freedom at thefreedomspecialist.com.
If you want to stop divorce fast, you do not need to waste years in therapy. You do not need to work on yourself, and you do not even have to have your spouse on board. If your spouse wants out, if they're filing for divorce, separation, or having an affair, what you need is a proven process to turn your marriage around. Book a free breakthrough session with us at highthrivecoaching.com/apply.
Dr. Richard London, who has 25 years of experience being known as the Man of Steel with the Heart of Velvet, presents the Life Wellness System, The Road to Yes, a mentoring system that brings you to becoming a wellness heir. Imagine having wealth, wellness, love, peace, and spirituality in abundance and balance now. Visit doctorateoflife.com or call 720-213-8021 for a free 15-minute wellness evaluation.
The first thing you need to know about me is that I love my kids, but they are not my everything. they used to be, but that's when my entire life fell apart. In order to pick back up the pieces, I had to put the love I have for myself before everything else, including my kids. I'm Jessica Dennehy, and I own multiple businesses. I'm a best-selling author, and I have all the strategies that I've used to make my life what it is today. And I'm going to teach you how to do them in my new book, Selfish is a Superpower. So go get your copy today on Barnes & Noble or jessicadennehy.com.
Announcing a revolutionary tool for wellness. Scalar Light has the ability to enhance and harmonize your own bioenergies. With Scalar Light, you can get started in just minutes and begin feeling better the very next day. Scalar Light is a remote energy that gently and subtly works with your own body's bioenergies, increases pro-cellular wellness, and enhances your body's immunity.
Experience the benefits of Scalar Light. Try a complimentary 15-day experience at scalarlight.com.
In your hands lie ancestral patterns. These patterns shape how you think, what you struggle with, and experiences you love, your life pattern. We're going into the latest neuroscience of biological hand analysis, a realm beyond palmistry where science and the soul entwine. Hand analysis is the latest method to transform lifelong patterns. I am Master Hand Analyst Brent Bruning. Join us and visit thepowerinyourhands.com.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest, Christie Tate, who's here to share with us her book, Group: How One Therapist and a Circle of Strangers Saved My Life. Before I left for break, we were talking about being in your first therapy session, your group therapy session, and what that was like. And I think a lot of people would have a lot of fear around that, sitting down with a big group of strangers, telling them your deep, dark secrets or just anything about you. It's got to be pretty scary.
Right. It's what I remember about that first time is I'm like, wait, how are we going to do this? I'm a stranger to you. You 6 people are strangers to me. How are we going to catch up? Like in one 90-minute session, are you going to learn like why I'm here, all my baggage, my big high points on my lifeline, and I'm going to learn all of yours? Like how is there enough time? And I've noticed that since then. I've been going continuously since 2001, and I'm in a group, and we just got a new member a couple months ago, and it brings it all back because I'm like, oh my God, she has no idea, what my story is. I don't know her story. And you know what I learned from that is that it takes a long time to get to know someone. I could sit down and tell you, well, I was born, I have this kind of family, there's this addiction, this tragedy happened. This is what Christmases were like. I could tell you all that quote data, but we wouldn't know each other until we put in the time. And that's what group is. Over time, I've gotten to know my group mates deeply, intimately. I learn about them in the present moment. I learn about what part of their history matters to them or how I trigger them. And you can't do it in one session. You can't do it in 2. It actually takes a very long time to build a relationship. And that process at last and finally is absolutely glorious and vivifying for me in a way that I'm like, whew, now it doesn't feel scary or overwhelming. It feels like the greatest joy of life.
What's interesting, you talk about, it takes time. It takes time with friendships outside of group to develop relationships and commit, to these kind of connections with people.
Yes, that's what I think. This circles back to our conversation about loneliness. I I fell for it too, that, oh, if I text you a couple of memes every week and, haha, look at this funny news story about Meg Ryan or look what's going on with R. Kelly. And that I fell for the idea, even all my years of group, that that would be enough to sustain a deep, intimate relationship, the kind of connections that I've been longing for all my life. And I just know it's not enough. Not for me. I need to pick up the phone. I need to make time. What has helped me with all that I know about myself and how I need to connect is to have set regular times with my friends. I have a group of friends who I knew in high school, lost connection with. We reconnected during the pandemic and we still do a Zoom call every Sunday. And it's at a set time. I have the same thing. I have a standing lunch date on Wednesdays. And we spend an hour together every Wednesday. You get to take a lunch break anyway. And it's already set in my schedule. And this works because what gets in the way now that I'm a busy, healthy adult and mother and writer is scheduling, right? Like everybody knows the hell of like, I can't do Tuesday. What about Wednesday? Okay, well, how about Thursday at 4? If this is built into my schedule, it's happening. I don't have to think about it. There's no texts about what time and what day. We already know. And I've built so much of that into my schedule that I can't escape. I can't escape. And I can't lose touch because it's already built in. I just go. On Wednesday, I just get up at 11:50 and I walk over to the lunch spot and there everybody is. And it's a way to really put my values and my time in harmony.
It's really investing in yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know when I like for my Sunday call that I do with 3 friends from high school, and we live all over the country. I was traveling during a lot of October, so I missed like 3 sessions in a row, and I deeply, deeply missed them. And I was realizing I was gonna miss when I was realizing I was gonna miss the 3rd session in a row, I was so upset. And I was grateful I was upset. Like, this matters to me. This is the fabric of my life. This is what I'm building for and built for. And I was like, "What do I do?" And I had the genius idea to pick up the phone and call each of them and just say, "Hi, I'm gonna miss the call Sunday. Tell me what's going on with you." And one of my friends who's a therapist and she also is in the Dr. Rosen world, she has the greatest line. She'll call me and she'll say, "I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to pick up my son. Tell me what's new. What do I need to know about what's going on in Christie Tate's life today? Give me the highlights." And it's so brilliant because I never hesitate to pick up the phone when she calls because I know she's busy. She's as busy as I am. So it's like we don't have to do an hour, but we can do those 10 minutes in between our longer lunches and our walks on the lake. And it's just a really great way to say, I've got 10 minutes. I want to share them with you. What's on your mind, what's on your heart. And then when our kid gets in the car, bye, talk to you soon. It's awesome.
It's so great to have that kind of connection because you can have these really deep connections with friends this way and also accomplish things that are like you have to pick up your kid. I mean, there's
Right.
you can't be on the phone for 2 or 3 hours or whatever period of time.
Yes, yeah, and this summer I turned 50 and I was not in the mood. Just I don't like big huge parties. They just go by in a blur and then I wake up the next morning feeling kind of empty. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to have 50 dates with 50 different people. And I was trying to map this out and I told a friend about it and I was like, that's a lot of dinners out. What am I going to do? And she's like, come over to my house and I need to go to the bank and let's walk to the bank. I need to get something certified, which is not something that sounds very sexy or fun. We had the best time. And now we call it running errands together. Like if I need to bop over to Target and then, go to the grocery store to pick up bananas and bread, invite a friend. I would have never thought of this. That's part of the isolation of our society and the way that we built our world. But I've got a couple friends who live within a few blocks of me. And if I'm just going to go run and do something, I'll call them and say, "Hey, I'm going to Jewel. Do you want to come with me? Round trip, we're talking 45 minutes." Running errands with friends is the most amazing thing. I feel like it's more important than Spanx. Like This is revolutionary because we all have to go to the post office. The post office is terrible. I hate the post office. But if I'm standing next to a friend catching up with her, hearing about her kids at college or her husband got a promotion, suddenly the post office is a site of connection and levity. So I'm passing that along in case anyone's like hates errands but loves their friends.
Well, and I think that that's a perfect way to connect with people, especially when you have people in your neighborhood. It's like, hey, you want to go out and do something because other people are feeling lonely too. It's not just us.
Mhm. Yeah. And I hear all the time people say it's really hard to make friends in middle age. And I totally get that. My kids are school age, so they're in middle school and high school, and everyone's already got their friends, right? All the parents have that's how it feels, right? That's the narrative that I carry. Oh, everyone's already got their friends. Plus, my kids make their own social arrangements. I'm not setting up play dates and giving everybody a juice box anymore, and the parents are coming. So there's less opportunities. So I hear people struggling with this all the time. Or if you have to move to a new city, where do you begin? Especially if you don't have kids and you're relying on them to sort of like their friends, the parents of their friends become your friends. It's like the skills, the opportunities, and what's really blown this open for me is well, I live in Chicago. I live very, it's pretty dense in Chicago. I have neighbors all around me. What about having a cup of coffee on the porch? What about a walk? What about, just come over for it doesn't have to be big. I'm a terrible cook, so I'm always like, oh, who wants to come and eat my who wants to come and eat my food? But like, you want to come over for tea and cookies or a piece of fruit, like it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be big. The bigger that I tell myself it has to be, the less likely I'll do it. So to make it something just easy, you want to walk around the block, you want to take our dogs on a walk, it can be low key and that's something and that counts.
I love that. I think that that is just so empowering to have these just simple ideas. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy. It's not like having to go out, for dinner every night with a different friend. It could be just like, hey, let's go for a walk. Let's talk. Let's hang out on the porch. I love that. Absolutely love that.
Yes. Well, that's the other thing too, and obviously, I think obviously my training as a group therapy member for 20 years and counting, I really do love groups. And, time is short. We work, we parent, we want to have downtime, we want to work in the garden, all of those things. And so now I find it really interesting to put groups of friends together. If there's three friends I want to spend time with, more than three gets a little bit hectic, but why not have them all over for coffee? Then they can become each other's friends. And instead of like three separate coffees, which is hard to schedule in a busy life, well, if you had one coffee and three of your friends, like there's the synergy and the chemistry among people that's can be super fascinating. And then you've brought people together like, it was really empowering for me to understand I could be a person who brings other people together, and then I'll be the recipient of that when other people are like, "Hey, do you would totally get along with my friend Lindsay. Let's all get together." It's like, "Oh, this is great." It just feeds on itself. Community, once it starts building, I believe, feeds on itself.
And would you have ever thought that you would be this great point of connection years ago? You know?
No, in a million years, I would have not even it is completely a marvel to me. I can't even believe it. It's a complete can people change? Yes, they can. It takes a few therapy sessions and it takes some inner work, but people can change. My life is proof of that.
Isn't that the truth? And how empowering is that these changes can be made? With Dr. Rosen's groups, what was the most interesting, or I'm sure you have many interesting groups that you attended, but one you can share with us that really kind of sticks in your mind?
Yeah, when I joined group, what surprised me most when I started was how loud and out loud everybody was in the circle. People would be bawling or screaming or laughing or screaming at each other. And I had never seen that kind of unfettered emotion. I grew up in a very religious, very Catholic household. We were pretty repressed as people. So I had never really even seen people yell at each other. When I was growing up, we did silences and huffing and puffing and withdrawal. So this leaning into anger was completely terrifying and exciting and wholly novel to me. So I got used to that. What I never expected is one day, probably, I want to say it was maybe 4 years into treatment. I go in, now I've been around 4 years. I think I'm a veteran and I've seen everything. And I sit in my seat with these 6 other people I know very, very well. Dr. Rosen takes his seat and nobody talks. Nobody says anything. And it's interesting. And 5 minutes go by, and that's a record. And I'm thinking to myself, who is going to break the silence? And silence happens in group, more typically what happens is we go in and sit down and someone's like, "Oh my God, I have to tell you what happened at work." Or, "Oh my God, you guys, I went on a trip and this is what happened." Like somebody breaks the ice with like a burning desire. But this session, 5 minutes went by and then 10 minutes went by and I was super uncomfortable, like, "Oh my god, somebody say something." Nobody said anything. Down below us, we can hear the L tracks. We can hear, like, voices in the hallway. Nobody says anything, and I am telling you, 90 minutes went by, and nobody said a word, not one word. It was even thinking about it now, I kind of feel like that the anxiety of how intense that was, and at the very end, it was time to go. It was 9 o'clock. We started at 7:30. No one has said a syllable, and Dr. Rosen closed the meeting as he always did. He sits forward in his chair and he says, "We'll stop there for today." And we all stood up and we closed the way we normally do, and we walked out, and in the hallway, we still had this, like, hushed, reverent, I don't know, the vibe was just crazy, and I turned to one of my group mates and I was like, "What in the world was that?" And then we all were just sort of laughing in awe. It was like something really spiritual and grace-filled and unusual. I have never sat in silence awake with other people during the day and paid for it. It was one of the most bizarre 90 minutes of my life. That's absolutely one of my favorite group memories.
That is a very unique one for sure. Were there, I mean, because you talked about anger a little bit ago. I mean, were there points in that you were in the group where you really kind of leaned into that anger a little bit more than normal?
Yeah, and I resisted so hard. I really had a message in my head that good girls do not get angry. Also, I had a lot of excuses why I couldn't let my anger up and out. One of them was, "Oh, if I'm in recovery and I'm spiritual and I've worked the steps of recovery and I've recovered from bulimia, I shouldn't be so angry." But the truth is, I was really, really angry and I had no idea how to get it out. And by the time I got to Dr. Rosen's office, I was a 27-year-old woman who was sitting on a literal lifetime of anger. And Dr. Rosen at one point turned to me and he said, "What do you think bulimia is?" And I was like, "Well, what do you think it is?" And he's like, "It's stuffing feelings. It's anger. It's not really about your body or being skinny. It's anger that you're stuffing down and that you have to get out." And I was pretty convinced by that. And because I was in group, I'd seen other people yell at Dr. Rosen, like all kinds of expletives and, words I had never screamed at anyone in my life. And being in a place where anger is not only safe but sacred really, really made me understand that, okay, some of this is going to have to come out. And, you sit in an intense group and someone I'm a pretty sensitive person, and it would feel like, oh, someone was criticizing me and he didn't understand me, or I would feel like my group mates were needling me and pushing me. And I have no idea what they were actually doing. That was just my subjective experience. And I would feel pushed, and then I'd like lash out. And early on, it would be like one thing like, stop, or leave me alone, or shut up. And that felt so revolutionary. But then I slowly learned how to really let it out. And the first time I really, really let myself say all the things I wanted to say, even though they were nonsensical and very crude. I left a message on Dr. Rosen's voicemail. I was really, really mad at him. I felt like I had the experience that he wasn't helping me and he was helping my group mates, which was a super old trigger. Like, oh, you care more about my siblings than you do about me. So I called him and I left a message, and I was yelling at the top of my lungs the entire message, and the voicemail cut me off. That's how long I was yelling. I was like, "Oh my god, what have I done?" The next morning I had group and I go in there and I'm so embarrassed. Like I totally tantrumed. Totally tantrumed. And he's smiling at me, and I know he wants me to tell the group about the voicemail I left, and he prompted me, and he just beamed at me. He beamed at me like I had left him a gorgeous poem or played him a sonata, and he said, "That was so beautiful." And he meant it. And then he said, "I want the group to hear this." So we all got up. We were in the group room. We walked down this hallway into his office where his phone is. And he called up his voicemail and he played for the group my voicemail in all of its glory. 100, what there was like 1 minute and 21 seconds. And I am not even making sense. I'm just yelling at him, and he is rubbing his heart like I had given him a huge gift. And when you have an authority figure, a doctor or a parent who treats your anger like something beautiful, which is what my experience was, I did finally understand that the expression of feelings could include anger and the quote so-called ugly emotions that I had been refusing to acknowledge or express, that if I brought them into my relationships, I would get closer to people and that intimacy would be more possible. And that hiding my anger, which became a kind of secret, right? I'd be mad at a friend, or I'd be mad at my mom or my sister or a boyfriend. And I would think, oh, okay, I'm not allowed to be angry. I'm going to swallow it, and it would become poisonous because then I'd be secretly seething or withdrawn, and relationships can't thrive if you're withdrawing and not showing your full self, which includes anger or shame or terror. And I just hadn't ever seen or known how to do that. And so in group, it was pure skill building, how to show anger, how to tolerate other people's anger. And I don't think I would be where I am today if I hadn't learned how to get some of that emotion expressed in front of other people and in my relationships.
What a gift that is, even though I'm sure we have some listeners probably going, "Oh my gosh, I don't think I could do that." That would be scary to do. But I mean, what a gift to be able to start releasing that anger and being in a place where it was safe to do that.
Yeah, I'm very glad that in my initial sessions, my preliminary sessions with Dr. Rosen, I am very glad he didn't give me too vivid of a preview about what I could expect, because it would have been too scary. It really would have been too scary. And I just remembered in my first session what he said to me. I said, "Well, if I join one of your groups, what's going to happen to me?" And he got real serious and he said, "When you join group, you are going to feel more lonely than you've ever felt in your whole life." And I was shocked. I was like, "Then why am I doing this? What are you talking about?" I'm here to feel better. And he said, "You have been starving you are like a person who has been starving your whole life. That's what the loneliness is. And when you join group, it's like taking that first bite of bread. And when a person is starving and they first start to eat, it is only then that they know how hungry they truly are." And I was like, oh my God, is this your sales pitch? Because it's terrible. But I but I also just thought he's not he's not soft pedaling. This is serious business. And I believed what he was saying. I had done a little bit of recreational starving and I knew what he was talking about. And he was just so confident that it was where I needed to go because he'd said to me, "What do you want?" And I my true answer, for some reason, I just felt sitting across from him, I felt like I'd taken some truth serum. So I didn't do my usual image management or kind of hedging. He said to me, "What do you want?" And I said, "I want a boyfriend with excellent hygiene." And he was like, "Okay, well, what else do you want?" And I was like, "No, that's it. That's what I want. I want a boyfriend and I want him to smell good." He was like, "Well, you can have so much more than that." And I thought to my the way that I was thinking, if you can bring me one intimate relationship, I will give you all of my money and my firstborn child. And he made it seem like, "Oh, you can have friends, you can have children, you can have a husband, you can have a career. Sky's the limit. Let's do it." And his confidence and cockiness was so compelling. I just thought, okay, I'll try it. If you're wrong, I'm going to kill myself. But okay, I gave him 5 years. I gave him a 5 year runway to change my life. And he was like, great, that's plenty of time. See you in a month.
My gosh. What a just a profound um, group that is, and a profound setting. It sounds like you had the right doctor, the right therapist to work with because he really knew how to manage these groups in a way that empowered people.
Yeah, I definitely look back and I think about how vulnerable I was. I was a young woman who was really desperate, inching towards suicidal ideation, and I was poised to be professionally successful, right? If I could survive. And I think about if I would have landed in a chair across from a charlatan or a nefarious actor or somebody who was not skilled or had malintent. I was so vulnerable. I would have gone to Guyana with Jim Jones. I got very lucky that I landed in a place that worked for me and that had a process in place that was built for healing of for people like me. I got really, really lucky because I was really, really vulnerable.
Chrissy, what do you want people and our readers and listeners to know about group?
I want them first and foremost to know that that is a tool. Group therapy is not for everybody. If it sounds like something you'd rather die than do, then it may not be a tool for you. But I do think that readers and listeners, the more we know what's out there, what is possible, the more tools in our toolbox, the better off we are. So group may not sound like the right thing for you, or you may have a daughter who's suffering in ways that you hear me talking about that I was suffering. And now here's one more tool along with regular talk therapy or psychedelics or CBT, whatever. There's so many modalities for healing. I don't believe that my message isn't group is for everyone. The whole world would be better for group. My message is, do you know about this very powerful tool that is extremely potent? It changed my life. And also, it is less expensive than, I couldn't have afforded one-on-one talk therapy when I was a law student. That was a non-starter, and I didn't know if I had 2 years to wait with my mental health and the balance. So, I want readers to know group as a tool. I also want to introduce the idea or reinforce the idea that letting go of secrets is a really, really self-loving thing to do. And even if you don't join a group or have a Dr. Rosen, could you tell something that you're holding on as a secret? Could you tell a friend, a pastor, a coworker? Could you unburden yourself of some of the weight of your secrets because that is the most transformative thing I ever did. And you don't have to join group therapy to let go of secrets. That's just one way to do it.
Christie, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your book?
Yes, I would love interacting with readers. I'm very active on Instagram. I love to talk about books, mental health. And if they're books about mental health, then that's my complete bullseye. So I'm on Instagram as Christie Tate. I also have a website where I put up my writing and news about a book tour or things that are happening where you might be able to meet me in person. And my website is christietate.com. And I certainly welcome conversations about any of the things we've talked about, really, and books and anything else. I'm a chatty person, so I'm happy to interact.
Well, Christie, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you for this wonderful conversation. It's been a real highlight of my morning.
Well, Christie, it's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your book, Group. Group's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere books are sold. And I've actually picked up the audiobook and I'm loving it, so you might want to check that out too. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.